My name is Nora Fields, and I'm 38 years old. 5 Saturdays after I got the keys to the first house I had ever owned, a silver minivan rolled up my gravel driveway, and my sister climbed out with her 2 kids, 2 suitcases, and a smile like the last 3 years had never happened. The same sister who sat in the witness chair at my divorce trial and testified for my ex-husband. I had worked myself half to death for that gravel, that porch, that deed. The one name on that deed is mine. What Dana said on my porch that morning was bold enough. But what my family did 2 weeks later on a Sunday I will never forget, is the part I still can't quite believe. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This channel is where women who rebuilt their lives from nothing share what it costs them, and what they refused to give up. If stories about family, betrayal, and hard-won peace speak to you, drop a comment below, and be sure to subscribe. Because this story starts with a marriage, runs through a courtroom, and ends on a driveway. And every stone of that gravel got paid for twice. To see how a sister ends up on the wrong side of a courtroom, you have to go back 4 years, to when I was 34 and thought I was a partner. My husband Greg owned Hartley Auto and Tire, a 6-bay shop on the east end of Harlan Falls, Ohio. I say he owned it, and that's the whole story right there. The business sat inside a company Greg had set up 2 years before our wedding. I ran the service desk, wrote the estimates, kept the books straight when he got creative, and turned wrenches when we were short a man, which was most weeks. The county fleet contract, 30 vehicles, came to us because their manager trusted me, and everybody knew it. Twice I asked Greg to add my name to the company. Twice he grinned and said, "Next quarter, Nor." He had a grin that could sell a rusted frame to a state inspector. I signed 11 years of my life over to that shop, one oil-stained day at a time, and my name never made it onto a single page that mattered. There was a small safe in the back office. Greg kept the combination the way some men keep a mistress, close and quiet and just for him. I told myself every marriage has a locked drawer somewhere. That was the lie I could afford back then. The shop smelled like brake dust and burnt coffee, and I loved it the way you love a child you didn't get to name. Looking back, the signs were stacked like a parts order nobody wanted to check in. I checked everything else in that building. The one inventory I never got to run was on my own husband. Here's what you need to know about my family, and I'll keep it short because it isn't pretty. My dad, Ray Fields, dropped dead of a heart attack when I was 19 and Dana was 12. He was a machinist with a Craftsman toolbox he'd bought used the year I was born, and he was the only person who ever asked me what I wanted. After the funeral, my mom Carol went dark for about half a year, the kind of dark where the electric bill goes unopened. So I quit the technical program I'd started, took a job at a quick lube, and became the family's load-bearing wall. I paid for Dana's summer camp when she was 13. I paid for her prom dress at 16. My mom had a phrase she used like a prayer every time Dana stumbled and I caught her. "You're the strong one." She said it the way you'd read a label on a machine, like it was printed on me at the factory. I remember handing Dana money for that prom dress, money I'd earned lying under trucks, and she took it without looking up and said, "You'll be fine. You're always fine." She was 16. She'd already learned the family math. Fine was my job title. I mistook being needed for being loved. And I want to be honest with you. I kept making that mistake for a long time. It had a price tag on it the whole while. I just hadn't been handed the invoice yet. Dad's toolbox came to me because nobody else wanted to haul it. I hauled it everywhere I went for 19 years. Some people inherit money. I inherited the thing you fix other people's lives with, and a family that thought the fixing came free. Marriages have warning lights, same as engines, and mine started flashing the fall. I turned 34. Greg's phone began sleeping face down. There were inventory runs on Thursday nights that came back with no inventory. He smelled like a restaurant we never went to. I'm a mechanic. I don't ignore a light and hope, I pull the code. So I drove past the dealership across town on a Thursday and saw his truck parked behind it, next to a red coupe that belonged to Brittany, the finance woman who'd flirted with him at every trade show since forever. I sat there long enough to be sure, then went home and asked him straight. At our own kitchen table, no shouting. He didn't even bother to deny it. He folded his hands like a loan officer and said, Let's keep this civilized, Nor. No need to burn the shop down over it. The shop. His first thought was, the shop. Mine should have been too, because a week later I found the back office safe hanging open. Greg was careless when he was distracted, and I read what was inside. The company papers, older than our marriage, his name alone, and bank statements for an account I had never seen, with steady money walking out of the shop into somewhere labeled renovations. We hadn't renovated so much as a bathroom faucet in 3 years. I stood in that office with the furnace ticking and understood I wasn't reading a husband's paperwork. I was reading an exit plan, and it had been in motion while I was still ordering his birthday cake. I photographed nothing, took nothing. I just closed the safe and started making a list in my head of everything in that building my hands had built, and my name had never touched. I hired a lawyer the next week, a small office woman named Alvarez who wore reading glasses on a chain and did not sugarcoat. She laid it out plain. The shop was premarital property, his company, his name. My path was to prove what the law calls active appreciation, that the business had grown in value during the marriage because of my work. 11 years of estimates, fleet accounts, and payroll I'd untangled, we could show all of it, if people who'd been inside the shop backed me up. Marcy, the bookkeeper Greg had pushed out the year before, was on my list. So was Dana. My sister had worked our front desk for 2 years after her second layoff, answering phones I paid her to answer. She'd seen who ran that place. Alvarez said family witnesses read well with judges, and I remember feeling something almost like relief. Meanwhile, Greg moved like a man who'd rehearsed. My login to the shop system died on a Tuesday. The locks got changed on a Friday, and my key to the building I'd opened at 6 in the morning for a decade turned into a souvenir. The renovations account, Alvarez's forensic guy found, had been feeding cash somewhere soft and hard to trace for over 2 years. Every move I made by the book. I didn't take $1. I wanted to win clean, because clean was the only thing I had left that was fully mine. Then, Alvarez called me on a gray afternoon in March and said the other side had filed their witness list, and she read the names slow, and there was one she read twice. My sister's name. On his list. I stood in that rented kitchen holding the phone, listening to the refrigerator hum, doing the math and refusing the answer. The hearing room in the county courthouse had fluorescent lights and carpet the color of old gum, and that's where my little sister buried me. Dana wore a blue dress I'd never seen and didn't look at me once from the witness chair. She said, under oath, that I had always called the shop Greg's business, that I referred to myself as an employee, that I was, her words, impulsive with money, and she'd heard me complain about my own reckless spending. She delivered it in the flat voice of somebody reading a script practiced in a bathroom mirror, and 11 years of my work turned into a paycheck I should be grateful for. Alvarez objected where she could. It didn't matter much. A family witness reads well with judges, remember. It reads well in both directions. My mother sat in the gallery that day, and she sat on Dana's side of the aisle, purse in her lap, eyes forward, like she was at a church service she didn't love but wouldn't dream of leaving. During the recess, I caught up with Dana by the vending machines in the hallway. I didn't yell. I asked her one thing. Why? She looked at the machine, at the candy bars, anywhere that wasn't me, and then she gave me the answer she'd been giving me since she was 16. You'll be fine. You're always fine. Then she walked back into the room where she'd just sworn to tell the truth. I stood there with my quarters in my hand, and I finally heard that sentence for what it was. It wasn't faith in me. It was a permission slip, signed by everybody I loved, to take whatever I had, because the strong one regrows what you cut off her. That's what they all believed. I had believed it too, and the bill for believing it was about to come due. The ruling came down in early June. The shop was Greg's, premarital, untouchable. My active appreciation claim, gutted by my own sister's testimony, was settled with a buyout of $40,000. 11 years, $40,000. Call it $10 a day. I did the division one night and wished I hadn't. The rental house went with him too, his name on the lease, his landlord buddy happy to keep him. I was given 2 weeks to collect my personal property from the shop. I took one thing, my dad's Craftsman toolbox, every drawer mine, bought by Ray Fields the year I was born, and there was an old handwritten bill of sale in the top drawer with the name Fields on it, so even Greg's lawyer couldn't pretend otherwise. I rolled it across that parking lot on a Tuesday morning while two techs I had trained pretended to be busy. Greg stood in the door of Bay 1 with his coffee, watching, comfortable as a landlord. When I got to my pickup, he raised his cup and said, "No hard feelings, Nor." I ran the box up the ramp, strapped it down, and drove off his property and did not give him the mirror check he was hoping for. That night, my mother finally called. I sat on a mattress on a floor and let it ring twice before I answered, and I'll admit part of me still expected her to ask where I was sleeping. She didn't ask. She said Dana had been through so much with Kyle's debts, and the family needed to heal now, and then she said the sentence she'd carry like a casserole to every disaster that came after. "Don't make this into a war, Nora. Your sister is struggling too." Struggling. I looked around the room at everything I owned, and it fit against one wall. I rented a room above the coin laundry on 2nd Street, the kind of place where the dryers thump under your floor until 10 at night like a heartbeat you didn't ask for. On the first night, I sat down with a legal pad and made an inventory, because inventories are how I calm down. 1 toolbox, $40,000, 2 hands with 20 years of certifications in them, 0 debts, 0 people I owed a single explanation to, as of that afternoon. I blocked Greg's number, my mother and Dana. I didn't block, I just stopped answering, and if you've never felt the difference, it's the difference between slamming a door and simply not standing in doorways anymore. 4th item on the pad, and I wrote it slow, in capital letters, like a work order. The next thing I build will have one name on it. I'm telling you this part plainly because I know how it sounds. It sounds cold. Where I come from, a woman who stops picking up is a scandal, and a man who empties a marriage through a side account is just business-minded. I'd spent 16 years being the net under everybody's high-wire act. The net doesn't get a turn on the wire, so I folded the net. 3 years. That's what it took. And I'm going to walk you through those years quickly because they weren't dramatic, they were just heavy. But I want you to notice one thing as we go. The whole time, I believed distance was the same thing as safety. I believed if I built far enough away from my family, what I built would be safe from them. I was wrong about that. Here's what rebuilding actually looks like, for anyone who's had to do it. It looks like a 9-year-old cargo van I bought at auction for $3,800 and brought back to life on a Sunday with my dad's tools. I lettered the side myself. Fields Mobile Repair. 1 woman. Fair rates. Days. I drove that van to driveways and church parking lots and fixed what people couldn't afford to tow. Nights. 4 shifts a week. I pulled orders at the parts warehouse out by the county line, walking concrete until 2 in the morning. Sundays after service let out, I did brake jobs for widows at half the shop rate, and those women paid me back in a currency Greg never understood. They talked. Word of the honest mechanic lady spread through Harlan Falls faster than any ad I could have bought. The county fleet manager called me himself, said their work had gone downhill since I left Hartley's, and moved the whole 30-vehicle contract to my van. I slept 5 hours a night. I ate lunch sitting on a milk crate. I taped a savings goal to the dashboard and watched the number climb like a patient watching a monitor. People ask why I didn't just move away and start over somewhere nobody knew my name, because Harlan Falls was my town too. I'd earned every wrench I owned there, and I wasn't going to let the people who took the shop take the map. If you've ever refused to be the one who leaves, tell me in the comments. I read them. And stick around, because the hardest part of this story wasn't the work. The work was simple. The hard part drove up my gravel 3 years later wearing my sister's face. Anyway, on a wet Tuesday in my 2nd year, a tow truck died on the shoulder of Route 9, and stopping for it changed my whole life. The dead wrecker belonged to Novak's Garage, a 4-bay shop on the west edge of town that had been there since before I was born. Behind the wheel sat Walt Novak himself, 71 years old, flannel shirt, hands like tree roots. His fuel pump relay had cooked itself. I had one in the van, swapped it on the shoulder in the rain, and when he asked what he owed me, I quoted him the part plus 20 minutes of labor. Exact. He looked at the invoice longer than the job took. Most people pat a bill for a stranded old man or wave it to look like a saint. An honest number apparently read like poetry. The next week he called and offered me weekend bays at his shop. Overflow work. No strings. Novak's was worn but solid, the kind of shop where the floor jack is older than the apprentice and nothing important is broken. Walt had buried his wife 2 springs back. No kids in the trade. He moved slower than he wanted to and watched me work the way old machinists watch, saying nothing, missing nothing. On the office wall, next to a calendar from a parts supplier that went under in the 90s, hung a little hand-painted board, the paint gone amber. Fair price. Paid in full. No favors. I asked him about it once. He said his father painted it the week the shop opened, and that it had cost the family some friends and saved the business about a dozen times. I wrote nothing down. Didn't need to. Some sentences go into you like a press-fit bearing, and you only find out later they're holding the whole assembly together. Walt started calling me on Tuesdays about jobs that stumped his young tech Denny. Then he started calling me on Tuesdays about nothing. I didn't know yet that the old man was interviewing me. He knew. The truth about my sister found me on a loading dock at 11 at night, the way truth does, off-duty and unannounced. Marcy Bell, Greg's old bookkeeper, had taken a desk job at the parts warehouse, and one slow shift we ended up stacking cores side by side. She asked how I was holding up. Then she went quiet in a way that had weight to it, and said there was something that had sat wrong with her for 2 years. 2 weeks before my trial, she'd still had access to the shop's accounts, tail end of her notice period. She watched Greg cut a check for $18,000 against a credit line, and she heard him on the phone with Kyle, my sister's husband, telling him their card debt was handled and there'd be another check after, quote, things settle down. Greg called it keeping the family tidy. Marcy said she'd have come forward at the time, except she'd signed papers on her way out and needed her pension, and she was ashamed anyway, and I told her the truth. That it wouldn't have been admissible and wouldn't have mattered. What mattered was arithmetic. My sister's loyalty had a sticker price, $18,000, roughly what I'd paid out for her across all those years of camps and dresses and rescues, and Greg had simply bought the asset out from under me like a man picking up a repossessed truck. I clocked out, sat in my van in the lot for a while with my hands on the wheel at 10 and 2, and then went back in and finished the shift, because the orders don't pull themselves. At the door, Marcy touched my sleeve and lowered her voice like the boxes were listening. And between us, he never mailed the second check. I want you to remember that detail. It's a load-bearing detail. It comes back. Through all 3 of those years, my mother kept a voicemail campaign running with the discipline of a utility company. I saved some of them. Not for evidence, there was no case to build, just so I'd stop wondering later if I'd imagined the pattern. Not one message asked where I was living. Not one asked if I was eating, sleeping, making it. They asked things of me. Thanksgiving is at Ruth's and it will look wrong if you're not there. Your sister asks about you. Which I knew the way you know weather. By checking. Because Dana's public life rolled on without a hitch and none of it ever rolled my way. And the big one, delivered in her church voice. Family is what's left when everything else is taken, Nora. My mother is not a monster, and I need you to hear that, because this story doesn't work if you sort her into the monster bin. She was raised by a woman who took in her brothers every time they fell, and she took in her own brother Dale's boy for 2 years in the 90s, and in her arithmetic. The strong lift the falling, forever. No invoice. And the lifting is what the word family means. She wasn't asking me for anything she hadn't paid herself. That's what made it so hard to hate her, and so necessary to stay away from her. Every October a birthday card still came to my P.O. box, her handwriting getting a little shakier, a $20 bill folded inside like I was still 12. I kept every card. I mailed every 20 back. You can love people from a distance, you can survive. That's a thing I learned above a laundromat. And I'd say it got easier. Except it never got easier. It just got quieter. Then Walt Novak decided to retire, and the quiet ended. He told me on a Tuesday, over coffee from his ancient percolator, that his knees had filed their notice and he was listing the property in the spring. Garage, plus the 2-bedroom house on the same lot, the one he and his wife had lived in for 40 years, 30 steps from Bay 1 across a gravel yard. The realtor said $310,000 for the package. Walt watched me absorb the number, then said the thing I still hear in his voice. Before it goes public. You want it? It's yours to earn. Fair price. Paid in full. No favors. His terms were simple and not soft. He'd carry a note himself for 130,000, 10 years at 6%, because he wanted the shop to stay a shop, and he'd decided I was the one who'd keep it one. The rest was mine to raise. I had $92,000, the 40 from the settlement I'd never let myself touch, and 52 more that 3 years of double shifts had stacked up $100 at a time. I took my books to the local bank, the one that still knows its customers by their trucks, and I brought the county fleet contract with me, and a folder of 3 years of mobile repair income that surprised the loan officer into sitting up straighter. They covered the gap. Every number added. Nobody did me any favors, and if you think I'm walking you through the math to brag, I'm not. I'm walking you through it because in about 20 minutes of this story, a group of people are going to stand on that gravel and tell me none of this counts. The night before closing, I lay awake till 3. And it wasn't the debt keeping my eyes open. For 19 years I'd had nothing anyone could take. Now there'd be something. Having something is its own kind of fear. Closing day was a Friday morning in September, in a title office with bad landscape paintings and wonderful coffee. 11 signatures. I counted them the way you count lug nuts, because torque matters and so do endings. And then the deed, printed plain as a parts label, and on the owner line, one name. Nora Fields. Not a company Greg built before a wedding. Not a lease under somebody's buddy. One name, mine. On land and walls and a roof. Recorded at the county for anyone to look up until long after I'm gone. Walt shook my hand once. Hard, the way you'd seat a hose clamp, and gave me both sets of keys on a plain steel ring. That afternoon, I did the only ceremony I cared about. I backed the van up to Bay 1, dropped the ramp, and rolled my father's Craftsman toolbox across the concrete to the left-hand corner. The same corner he'd kept it in at the house on Cedar Street when I was a girl standing on a milk crate to watch him work. 19 years that box had been in exile, garages and rented rooms and the back of a van. I set the wheel locks with my boot and stood there in the empty shop with my hand flat on the lid for a while, and if you'd walked in, you'd have thought I was checking the paint. That night I slept on an air mattress in the middle of the empty living room, no curtains yet, moonlight all over the floor, and I listened to the furnace tick and the gravel settle, the sounds of a building talking to its owner. Its owner. I got 5 Saturdays of that feeling. 5 Saturdays is what the world gave me before it came up the driveway to renegotiate, and I want to be fair to the world, that's 5 more than it had ever given me before. The sign went up on a Monday. Fields Garage, Sales and Service, and under it, smaller, the line every woman in the trades will recognize as a dare. Nora Fields, owner. The first week ran exactly like every woman who's worked a counter is expecting me to say it ran. A man in a dually asked to speak to the owner, and I wiped my hands on the rag and handed him my card and watched his software update in real time. To his credit, it did update. 2 callers asked when the real mechanic would be in. I kept Denny on, Walt's young tech, 24 years old, good hands, bad guess diagnosis habit. I've been sanding off him one work order at a time. Walt himself came by every Tuesday at 10, like a scheduled maintenance item. Bought coffee from the machine with exact change, though the coffee was free for him forever, sat in his old chair by the window, and offered no advice at all unless I asked for it, which is the rarest form of love I have personally encountered. First month's revenue covered the mortgage, the note to Walt, parts, Denny, and insurance, with about enough left over for a pizza. No miracle. A margin. Margins are all I've ever asked for. Before opening, I'd found his father's little hand-painted board in a drawer where Walt left it, wrapped in a shop towel like a relic, and I understood the message the way he intended it. I put a frame around it and hung it behind the register, where you can't miss it while you're paying. Fair price. Paid in full. No favors. A customer asked me if it was some kind of religious thing. I told her closest thing I've got. She laughed. I wasn't entirely joking, and I'd find out soon just how much I wasn't joking. News in a town like Harlan Falls doesn't travel through papers. It travels through open hoods. A fleet driver dropping off a plow truck told me 2 of Hartley's best techs had walked out over bounced paychecks. A parts rep, the chatty one, mentioned Greg's account had gone cash on delivery, which in our world is the sound of a heart monitor slowing down. The county contract, mine now, had been the spine of that shop's cash flow, and I knew better than anyone what its leaving would do, because I'm the one who'd kept the wound closed all those years. Brittany's red coupe, I heard, was last seen headed out of town in the spring. I didn't celebrate any of it, and I want to be precise about why, because this matters to how the story ends. A man drowning is not my victory. It's just water finding its level, and I had bays full of work and no time to stand on the bank watching. The other piece of news came through the family channel. Aunt Ruth to my mother to the church lobby to me, the way all official family news travels. Kyle had left Dana, gone to Texas for a job that may or may not have existed, leaving her the minivan, the kids, and a mortgage 3 months behind. And here's the part that closed a loop I'd been holding open since a loading dock 2 years before. The card debt, the famous $18,000 of loyalty money, had never been finished off. Greg's second check never came. The balance had been growing teeth the whole time, and a collection agency owned it now. The loyalty my sister sold me out for turned out to be a bounced promise from a man who bounced everything eventually. I found out on a Thursday. Bad news travels at the speed of family. By Saturday, my phone lit up with a name it hadn't shown in 3 years. The first text said, "Heard about the shop. So proud of you, sis!" Exclamation points like confetti. "We should catch up." Nothing in it about a courtroom, nothing about a blue dress and a witness chair. 3 years of silence, and she opens with pride, as if pride were hers to hand out over what I'd built in the crater she helped dig. I read it standing at the register under Walt's little board, and I did not answer it. The second text came 5 days later. "Mom says the house has 2 bedrooms? Bet it's beautiful." And there it is, I thought. There's the tape measure. Because that's not a compliment, that's an appraisal. And I'd been reading Dana's appraisals since she was 16 years old. I typed out an answer that was all lowercase hurt, deleted it. Typed a colder one, a lawyer's answer, deleted that too. I must have written her a dozen replies over 2 nights, sitting at my kitchen table in the house with one name on the deed, and every version was me explaining myself. And somewhere past midnight I finally understood that explaining myself was the family's oldest tax on me, and I wasn't filing anymore. I put the phone face down. I'd love to tell you I slept. Mostly I lay there listening to my own house hold its breath. People will tell you boundaries feel empowering. Sometimes. Mostly they feel like standing very still in work boots, waiting to find out what it costs this time. The 5th Saturday after closing mid-morning, I was under a fleet pickup in Bay 1 with a stubborn transmission line when I heard tires come off the road onto my gravel, slow and certain, a vehicle that knew it had arrived somewhere it planned to stay. I knew the engine before I saw the paint. A silver minivan with a tired belt squeal I would have fixed for free once, back when we were still sisters. Dana came out of the driver's seat already performing, sunglasses up into her hair, arms wide at the property like a game show hostess. "Oh my gosh, look at this place." Tyler slid out after her, 8 years old, all elbows, and little Emmy, 5, dragging a backpack with a unicorn on it, and the sight of those kids put a hook in my chest I want to be honest about, because none of what was coming was their doing. Then I saw the rest. 2 suitcases on the gravel. Trash bags with sleeves pressed against the plastic, the luggage of a fast exit, and strapped to the roof rack, a folded rollaway mattress under a blue tarp. She hadn't come to ask me a question. She'd come with the answer packed. She was up my porch steps while I was still wiping transmission fluid off my knuckles, talking the whole way, the words rehearsed in the smooth way that only sounds casual if nobody's listening closely, and I have spent 3 years listening closely. "The kids can share the second bedroom, they're good sleepers. I'll take the couch till we figure something out. It's temporary, obviously." Then she turned on the top step, taking in my yard, my shop, my roofline, and she delivered the line she'd clearly written on the drive over, the one that was supposed to end the conversation before it started. "We're family, Nora. And you have all this now. You have all this." There's a whole religion inside that sentence, and I was raised in it, and I know every hymn. What's yours exists to be allocated. The strong one is a public utility. Emmy waved at me from the gravel, shy, both hands around the strap of her unicorn backpack, and I waved back at her, because my quarrel has never once been with children. Then I looked at my sister and told her the truth. No, Dana, you can't live here. I said it the way I quote a break job: level, priced, final. She blinked like I'd spoken a foreign language, and honestly, in our family, I had. Then she ran through her gears, and I stood on my own porch and watched every one of them come. First gear? Sugar. Sisters help sisters. Remember when we shared a room? The kids adore you. Second gear? Guilt. And she reached for it, smooth as a downshift. They're sleeping in a motel, Nora. Look at them. Look at their faces. I did look. That's the terrible mechanics of it. She aimed her own children at me like a torque wrench. And then third gear, the old reliable, the family's national anthem, half shouted from my top step with her hand thrown toward my house. You'll be fine, you're always fine, so what does it even matter to you? There it was, 16 years old, handing back my prom dress money, 28 years old, in a courtroom hallway. And now on my porch. The same sentence. Because it had never once failed her before. I felt something settle in me, quiet as a wheel bearing finally seated true. You can earn a place here, I said. You can't claim one. She stared at me. I don't think she understood it. Not then. It wasn't in any language our family spoke. She called me selfish. She said, Mom was right about you, which told me exactly what the drive over had sounded like. She loaded the kids back in, Emmy still waving at me through the glass, God help me, and reversed down my gravel fast enough to spray it, and I stood there and listened to that belt squeal fade toward Route 9. I checked my watch. I remember thinking, with no humor at all, that the phone call to my mother would be connected before she cleared the county road. It took less than 2 days for the family to mobilize, and I say, family, and mean the whole apparatus: blood, marriage, church pew, and grocery aisle. My mother called first, and her opening line had clearly been drafted in committee. I did not raise you to shut a door on babies. Aunt Ruth called next, Ruth, who hadn't dialed my number since my divorce, to inform me that everyone at First Baptist was asking about it. Everyone, and what was she supposed to tell people? A man calling himself my cousin Roy, who I last saw at a funeral in another decade, left a voicemail that opened with "Hey stranger" and landed on, "You know she's got those kids." At the grocery store on Maple, 2 women from my mother's Bible study looked at me the way you look at a car parked across 2 spaces. One of my regular customers canceled an appointment, personal reasons, and didn't rebook. And I want you to notice the same thing I noticed, standing in my shop at closing time, phone buzzing itself sideways across the counter. In all of it, every call, every message, every casserole warm voice, no one, not one single person, asked why Dana had lost her house. No one asked where Kyle was, or what the debt was, or how it got that big, or what she planned to do next. The only question the entire network wanted answered was why I wouldn't hand over mine. The strong ones know is the only scandal the system recognizes. If you've ever been that person, the one whose refusal causes more outrage than everyone else's chaos, put the word strong in the comments, because I read them, and it matters to me that we can see each other. Then, keep listening, because on Wednesday night, on a delivery run, I drove past the First Baptist parking lot, and what I saw parked in the far corner under the security light took every bit of anger I had and bent it into something more complicated. It was the minivan, backed into the corner of the church lot under the light, the way you park when the vehicle is the address. The rear windows were packed to the glass, laundry baskets, the rolled mattress, a lamp lying on its side like something that had given up. The dome light was on. Tyler sat in the open side door doing homework on the lid of a cooler, workbook tilted toward the security light. Emmy was asleep across the middle seats with her arms around that unicorn backpack. Dana sat in the driver's seat, forehead against the wheel, not crying that I could see. Just parked. In every sense a person can be. I pulled over across the road and sat in the dark with my engine off for about 10 minutes, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I saw, because it's the reason the rest of this story goes the way it goes. I did not see a liar getting what she deserved. Although she was one, and she was. I saw the finished product of the factory we both came off of. They'd built me into a net, and never once asked what the net could carry. They'd built her into a package that was always supposed to be carried, and never taught her to stand. And then the men who'd promised to carry her, Kyle, Greg, the whole handshaking lot of them, had set her down on the pavement and driven off. Her loyalty had been bought with a check that bounced. Now the bill was sleeping in a minivan. In the morning, I called Pastor Hale, told him a family in the congregation wanted to cover a week at the Falls Motor Inn, plus grocery cards for a young mother in trouble, and to keep the name out of it, and I meant every word of the anonymity. That night, I understood the difference between helping someone and being consumed by them. One is a gift. The other is a toll. That Friday, as if the universe were running a clearance sale on my past, Greg Hartley walked into my shop. Thinner. Grayer at the temples. Handshake still calibrated to sell you something. He did a slow lap of my waiting room like an appraiser, complimented the floors, complimented the coffee machine, and then pitched me. And I'll give him this. The man could still pitch standing in the rubble. He'd heard great things. He still had the Hartley name, the East End location, decades of goodwill. And I had his word, the talent. Partnership. Like old times, but official this time, and he actually winked on the word official. Years too late. Somewhere mid-pitch the truth fell out of his pocket. The bank was moving on his building, and the pitch was a man grabbing for a rope and calling it a merger. I let him finish. 19-year-old me would have already been drawing up how to save him. 34-year-old me would have at least felt the pull. 38-year-old me wiped down the counter and said, "I have a shop. It's not for sharing. You taught me that. And it's the one thing I owe you." He tried the grin. Asked if I'd at least front him parts on credit. Buddy rates. Us being history and all. I pointed at the little board behind my register, at Walt's father's amber paint. Fair price. Paid in full. No favors. He read it twice like it might soften on the second pass. Then he called me cold, which from Greg is practically a diploma, and walked out to a truck I noticed he was careful to park where I couldn't see the plates. I felt nothing I'd need to confess. That night at 9 my phone buzzed once. My mother. A single line. No greeting. Sunday. We are all coming to talk some sense into you. Tuesday's coffee with Walt happened on Saturday that week, because I called him, which I had never once done for a non-mechanical problem. He came in his church supper cardigan and sat in his chair and listened to the whole thing without moving. Then I asked him the question that had been idling under everything for 3 years. Am I cruel, Walt? He thought about it the way he thinks about a noise you can only hear in 4th gear, long enough that you start to worry. Then he said, I sold you this place because you pay what things cost. Cruel is teaching somebody the world owes them rent. He rinsed his cup, put it in the rack, and left me with that. That night I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, because inventories are how I calm down, and I wrote out what I could actually give without setting myself on fire to reheat the family casserole. I needed counter help. That was simply true. Denny and I were drowning in paperwork every Friday. So, item 1. A job. 25 hours a week at Field's Garage, front desk, posted wage, same up on the wall for anyone who walks in. Item 2. I called the number on the listing for the apartments over on Millbrook, the decent ones with the playground, and asked what it would take to hold a 2-bedroom. Deposit and first month. Payable direct to the landlord. In Dana's name. On Dana's lease. Not my couch. Not my second bedroom. A floor of her own under her own feet. Which is the one thing our family had never once thought to hand her. I closed the pad and sat there in my quiet house. They were coming on Sunday to make me choose between my house and my family. I'd spent the week building a third door, and I was reasonably sure nobody on that gravel had ever seen one. They came at 2 o'clock. After church and lunch, 3 vehicles turning onto my gravel in a line like a procession. My mother's sedan, washed for the occasion. Aunt Ruth's SUV, and the minivan, which told me the motel week had ended and the summit had been scheduled accordingly. My mother got out in her good lavender church suit, and that detail undid me a little. She had dressed up to come disown me, or save me. In her mind, I truly believe those were the same errand. I met them in the yard at the picnic table Walt left behind, between the house and the shop, and I did not invite anyone inside, and everyone registered it. The door I hadn't opened stood behind me the whole time like a witness. No coffee, no lemonade. This wasn't hospitality, it was a hearing. The second one my family had held on my property rights. And this time, at least, I'd get to speak. Mom opened the way matriarchs open, not with an argument but with a genealogy. Family is what's left when everything else is taken, Nora. Her mother had taken in her brothers. Every fall. Every time. She herself had taken in Uncle Dale's boy for 2 years in the 90s, and fed him, and asked nothing. Now it was my turn. That's how she said it. It's your turn. Like the netting of falling relatives was a chore wheel hung in some eternal kitchen. This is how family works, she said, and spread her hands. Done. The way you rest a case that has never once been appealed. Behind her, Dana stood with her arms crossed, confident again. The kids sat on the porch steps of a house they'd been promised. That was the field. Then came the shot. Ruth went next, because Ruth is the network's loudspeaker and every summit needs one. Everyone is watching this, Nora. The whole congregation, the whole family. Your cousins in Dayton. Did I understand what it looked like? A woman alone in a big house while her sister's babies slept in a motor lodge. A big house, 2 bedrooms and a gravel yard. But in the family's mythology, my little lot had already grown wings and a west wing. And then my mother stepped past her, closed the distance, and I watched her gather herself the way people do before they lift something they know is too heavy for them. Her voice shook, and I wanted on the record that the shake was real. She believed every word she was about to spend. "Open that door for your sister," she said, "or you are no daughter of mine." The yard went very quiet. Even Ruth, who has never met a silence she didn't fill. Tyler looked up from the porch steps, 8 years old, listening to grown women decide what family means. And I thought, there it is, the whole machine, dressed for church, and pointed at my front door. Want and need, if you've been keeping score. Behind me, a house with one name on the deed. In front of me, my mother, offering the last version of her love I'd ever be offered, price sticker attached, and it was the old price. Everyone on that gravel believed there were only 2 doors I could walk through, hers or mine, and every face was set for one or the other. They'd driven out in a convoy to watch me choose between them. I looked at my mother's shaking hands, and at my sister's crossed arms, and I opened the 3rd door instead. "No one is moving into my house," I said, and I said it quietly, and the quiet did more work than volume ever has. This house is the first thing I ever built that nobody can take from me. It is not the family safety net. There's no such job anymore. It closed. Ruth started up. I raised one hand, grease still in the knuckle creases, and she stopped. Then I took the folder off the picnic table, the plain manila one I'd set there before they arrived, and I laid it out for Dana, item by item, the way I write an estimate, because an estimate is a kind of respect. A job at Field's Garage, front counter, 25 hours a week to start. The wage posted on my wall, the same number Denny started at, so nobody could ever call it charity, and nobody could ever call it a leash. And an apartment on Millbrook, the 2-bedroom with the playground below the window. Deposit and first month already arranged with the landlord, payable direct, never touching her hands. On a lease with one name on it. Hers. "Your own floor," I said to my sister. "Your own key. Your own paycheck. Nobody carries you, and you never have to say thank you to anyone at Thanksgiving. One condition. From today, whatever passes between you and me is given. It is never again taken. You can earn a place here. You can't claim one." Dana's arms came uncrossed. She looked at the folder, at me, and reached by pure reflex for the anthem, "You'll be fine. You're always." And I finally answered that sentence at last, after 15 years of hearing it. "I was never fine, Dana. I was just useful." I stopped confusing the two. My mother's face closed like a store. She said if I let her walk off this yard, she would not come back. And her voice broke on the word daughter somewhere in there. And I am not going to pretend to you that it didn't cut. It cut all the way down. "I know," I said very softly. "I'm not closing the door, Mom. I'm just done being the door everyone walks through." She looked at me for a long moment, my mother, in her lavender suit, in her 63rd year, And then she turned and walked to her sedan and drove off my gravel. And that sound, tires rolling slow over stone, is the sound the price of your life makes when it's finally being paid. Ruth followed her out, of course, pausing only to tell me she would pray for me, in the tone people use when they mean the opposite. And then the yard was just us. Dana, the kids on the steps, me, and a manila folder on a picnic table with the late afternoon sun coming across it. Nobody spoke. Emmy climbed down and pulled at her mother's hand, tired, done with the theater the way only a 5-year-old can be honestly done. Dana stood there a long time looking at that folder, and I watched my sister do math she had never been taught, weighing a couch she was owed against a floor she would have to earn. She didn't apologize. I want to be straight with you. There was no hallway movie moment, no hug, no tears in the gravel. She picked up the folder without meeting my eyes, the way you take a parts invoice you can't argue with, got her kids buckled and drove away slower than she'd ever left anywhere. She didn't say yes. But she didn't leave it on the table either, and with Dana, that was the closest thing to yes I had ever been handed. I sat on my porch steps until the light went copper, listening to my shop cool down and my house do nothing at all except stand there. Mine. Monday morning at 2 minutes to 8, I heard tires on the gravel and a belt squealing, and I put on a fresh pot of coffee. She came in hard-faced and on time, and she worked. Badly at first, then less badly. She double-booked the alignment rack her first week, and I corrected her the same way I correct Denny. Flat, specific. Once, and she looked at me waiting for the rest of it. The lecture, the interest on the favor. And it never came, because there was no favor. There was a posted wage, and a job being done. 2 weeks in, I handed the paychecks across the counter. Denny's, then hers. Same envelope, same payday. She held hers a long time. First money of her whole life, I'd bet anything. That nobody owed her, gave her, or slid to her under a table to keep the family tidy. She said one thing, not looking up. Kyle never once told me the rent was due until it was already late. That was all. It wasn't an apology. It was a bearing, seating itself, and I just nodded and let it seat. Because some repairs you do not interrupt. That same month, the bank finished with Hartley Auto and Tire, and the equipment crossed the auction block on a cold morning. I bought the good alignment lift through the online sale, market price against strangers, paid in full that afternoon, and sent a hauler for it rather than walk that floor myself. There was nothing over there I needed to see, and nothing I needed to say. And if Greg was watching the sale from somewhere, what he saw from me was a fair price, and silence. Fair price. Paid in full. No favors. It works in every direction. That's the whole point of the sign. It's been 4 months since the Sunday on the gravel, and here is where everything actually stands. No bows on it. Dana is still at the counter, 25 hours a week, better at it than either of us expected, sharp with the schedule, murder on a double booking. She rents the Millbrook 2-bedroom, her name on the lease, and she paid the second month herself. And the third, and she is chipping at that old collection debt out of her own checks. No miracles, just installments, which is how real people actually climb. Saturdays, Tyler and Emmy do their homework at the waiting room table, and Tyler has fallen in love with my father's Craftsman toolbox in the corner of Bay 1. Last week I let him tighten his first bolt, hand over hand on the ratchet, his tongue out sideways with concentration, and I heard my dad's voice come out of my own mouth. Snug is enough, kiddo. Strong doesn't mean stripped. Ray Fields would have liked that boy. My mother has not called. A Christmas card came to the house in December, her shaky hand, signed Mom, no apology, no questions, and I did with it what I do. I put it on the refrigerator, and I mailed nothing back but a card of my own, signed Nora, no apology, no questions. The door isn't locked. It just doesn't swing one way anymore. Ruth still tells the story her way at First Baptist. I still lose the odd customer over it, and the shop is still booked 2 weeks out, because the county trucks don't care about my reputation, they care about their brakes. Dana and I don't hug. We talk about the schedule, the parts orders, her kids, brake pads. Once in a while she says something almost like the beginning of the courtroom conversation, and I let it start and let it stop wherever it stops. We are not what we were. We are something smaller and cleaner, and it holds weight. And in this family, that makes it the strongest thing anyone has built in 3 generations. Saturday at closing time. This is how it goes now. Dana counts the drawer, shuts down the register, and drives her kids home to her own apartment, where her own key opens her own door. Emmy waves at me through the back glass the whole way down the driveway, and I wave back until they're gone. I lock the shop, check the bay doors, rest my hand flat on my dad's toolbox for a second, an old habit now, and walk the 30 steps across the gravel to my own house, where my key, on its plain steel ring, opens the door to rooms that answer to one name. The kitchen light comes on. The furnace ticks. 2 women from the same factory, each standing on her own floor for the first time in either of their lives, close enough to wave, far enough to stand. Here's what I know now, and it cost me a mother to learn it. So take it free of charge. Love that has to be paid. Like a debt isn't love, and the day you stop being everyone's safety net is the day you finally find out who was ever holding a net for you. That's my story. One deed with one name on it, one sister earning her way back, a paycheck at a time, and one door that still doesn't open for anyone who won't knock first. If you've ever been the strong one, protect what you built, and take today as your sign. Share this with someone who needs it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.